We are on to week 3 of the NFL season and, of course, the fantasy football season as well. I'm Nick Whalen here with Jeff Erickson, giving you some sneaky waiver wire ads ahead of week 3. Jeff, good to be back with you doing this. We'll be doing it every week throughout the season. Let's get right to the list. Who is your first sneaky ad for week 3?
Let's tackle the Kansas City Chiefs backfield. Isaiah Pacheco out with a fibula injury. Looks like an IR trip is a possibility. Definitely a multi-week injury. Let's talk Carson Steele. 2% rostered in Yahoo. It's likely the leading candidate. Lost a fumble against the Bengals, and yet the Chiefs returned right back to him. You were using him over Samaje Perine in most situations. Perine might be more involved in the passing game now that Pacheco is out. But I think the former rugby player Steele is a guy that is someone that we could go pick up in almost every single format. Even those super tight NFFC leagues, you could probably find some leagues where he's still available.
Yeah, I like that one quite a bit. I think both Perine and Carson Steele, they're going to have roles in the short and really the long term here. I mean, we're dealing with a fractured fibula for Isaiah Pacheco. I mean, this is not a 2 to 3 week injury. I think he's going to miss the bulk of the regular season. So, a lot of these ads that we're talking about, maybe they're 1 or 2 week guys. I don't think that's going to be the case with Perine or Carson Steele. I do expect the Chiefs to perhaps bring in another back at some point, but I think Perine and I think Steele, those are going to be the guys for the foreseeable future. Now, Steele's probably the short yardage guy. He's the goal line guy. I think there might be a little bit more upside with Perine in PPR leagues. He'll be the pass catcher. He caught 50 passes last season. We'll still mix in plenty on early down. So the PPR league, I'm prioritizing Perine over Carson Steele, but I think both of those guys will be hot waiver wire pickups this week.
So the wild card here is Kareem Hunt was trending on my timeline this morning. And I saw a comment that they're not entirely ruling out a return to Kansas City. Obviously, that would muck up the works. Probably not immediately. It'd probably take a few weeks to ramp up.
Yeah, that's a good call. And, whether it's someone like Kareem Hunt, it would be a retread or another veteran. I would expect that Kansas City, they have to add some depth here, at least until Clyde Edwards-Helaire is back in the mix. I want to bring up a couple of tight ends here, Jeff. And, neither of these names are overly exciting. We are talking about sneaky ads after all. But I'm keeping an eye on Luke Schoonmaker in Dallas. And this is, of course, contingent on if Jake Ferguson were to miss more time. He does seem to have dodged a serious injury, but still could be something that keeps him out for another week or two. And if that's the case, I really like Schoonmaker as a streaming option in this offense. He split snaps this past week with Brevin Spann-Ford, but Schoonmaker was clearly the tight end one without Ferguson. He ran a route on 17 of 28 snaps, was targeted 6 times by Dak Prescott. And remember, Schoonmaker was a second-round pick just last year. He's not just some, random dude filling in for Jake Ferguson. There is a real level of investment here on the part of the Cowboys. When Ferguson is healthy, Schoonmaker, not really a consideration unless you're in, a 2 tight end league or something really deep. But again, if Ferguson misses another game or two, I think Schoonmaker's a viable option.
Absolutely. We know that Dak likes to throw to his tight ends. It's interesting. They're finding other passing options in that offense there. Not just at the tight ends. They're also kind of digging deep at wide receiver. Maybe not super thrilled with what Brandon Cooks is bringing to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of like Brandon Cooks as an ad this past week. He did nothing. It turned out it was more of a Jalen Tolbert week for the Dallas Cowboys. What about you, Jeff? I know you have a tight end on your list.
I do. I'm going to say Mike Gesicki. Keep in mind, the Bengals really turned to the tight ends against the Chiefs, and we saw Isaiah Likely the week before against the Chiefs. They face Atlanta, so if you Kyle Pitts fans are pretty happy about that. But I think Gesicki is very important in this offense. As long as T. Higgins is out, they need another option there, and teams are going to just double Jamar Chase. That means they're going to throw the tight ends. I think he's the first of a committee. Eric All got some targets. Drew Sample got some targets. But Gesicki is the more targeted tight end. He's got some upside to him there. He's a red zone potential target too. So I think he's pretty good in a pinch.
Yeah, I like that one. And real quickly on the Bengals, Andrei Iosivas, I think we got to bring him up as well.
Yep.
He's very clearly been the wide receiver too with T. Higgins out these first 2 weeks of the season. The targets would bear that out. The snaps would bear it out. The routes run would bear it out even more. 2 touchdowns on 2 catches in week 2. So we can't necessarily depend on that every week. I'd like to see a little bit more volume there, but Joe Burrow clearly trusts Iosivas in the red zone. And I like the schedule these next couple of weeks for the Bengals as well. They get Washington and Carolina their next 2 games, 2 very, very gettable defenses. So much like Luke Schoonmaker, if T. Higgins is out, obviously I like Iosivas, just T. Higgins is back in the mix, maybe not so much, but I think there's a real possibility that T. Higgins could miss additional time. It didn't seem like he was particularly close to playing in week 2. So again, with good matchups coming up against Washington and Carolina, Andrei Iosivas is somebody I would consider. One more tight end I want to put on the radar, Jeff, Hunter Henry for the New England Patriots.
Yes.
And look, I want to throw the caveat out here that yes, I am aware he plays for the New England Patriots, but this has been a competent team so far, right? They're 1-1. I mean, they very easily could be 2-0. They lost in overtime in week 2. Hunter Henry played 57 of 68 snaps against Seattle. He caught 8 passes on 12 targets from Jacoby Brissett for 109 yards. Didn't do much of anything in week 1, so we do need to be realistic about expectations. But, what is this offense? It's a safe offense. It's a check down offense where the primary tight end is going to be involved. The Pats don't really throw the ball downfield. They only had 3 total catches by wide receivers in week 2. I looked this up, Jeff. Hunter Henry accounted for the 7 longest passing plays of the day for New England in week 2. No other player had a catch for more than 7 yards. Hunter Henry had 7 catches go for at least 8 yards. So again, maybe you're buying high on Hunter Henry. There's certainly some downside here. It is the Patriots after all, but he's worth mentioning.
Yeah, and it's been funny that we've had so little production from tight ends. We've had major injuries already at the position, or at least major players out, with both Ferguson and Evan Ingram missing this past week. Chances are you're going to be searching for a tight end, so I like that a lot. I got one more for you here. I'm going to go Ty Chandler on the Minnesota Vikings. I know that Aaron Jones is still the guy, but he was banged up, which he tends to be, and Chandler looked good against the Niners this past week. I think he's more than your average nominal backup. I think he's someone that is a backup plus. Should be rostered in deeper leagues already, but if you're looking for the short term, sometimes these Aaron Jones injuries look like nothing and they turn out to be 3 weeks. So I say go get him now.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of that from Aaron Jones in the past in Green Bay. I'm going to throw a couple more at you quickly here, Jeff. Okay. Diontae Foreman is another running back I'm keeping an eye on. Now, week 1, Jerome Ford controlled that backfield share as we expected, but we saw a lot more of Diontae Foreman in a close game in week 2 against Jacksonville. Ford did outsnap him 32-27, but Foreman saw 14 carries to just 7 for Jerome Ford, and their third running back, Pierre Strong, exited with a hamstring injury. Keep in mind that, of course, Nick Chubb could be back in a few weeks, and at that point, Foreman is probably relegated to RB3 status, but he's very much worth monitoring for me as a bench option right now. Certainly somebody I would add in deeper leagues. And this is another one where we like the matchups. The Browns play the Giants and the Commanders in 2 of their next 3 games. We'll see if Nick Chubb is back for any of those, but obviously he's going to miss at least 2 more. So I think we have an opportunity here for Diontae Foreman. And I want to bring up Romeo Doubs as well. The fantasy numbers, they don't jump off the page for Doubs. We saw him make a really nice contested catch on Sunday against the Colts. But through 2 games, Doubs leads the Packers in targets. He's played by far the most snaps of any receiver in that rotation. Obviously, the appeal is going to be a little bit limited as long as Malik Willis is the Packers starting quarterback. But once Jordan Love is back, which, hey, could be as early as week 3 or week 4, I think the underlying numbers lead me to believe that Doubs is somebody that I want on my rosters. Reed, Watson, Wicks, all those guys may be more explosive than Romeo Doubs, but he's seeing the most action. He's running the most routes so far for Green Bay. And I think if that continues, there's going to be fantasy payoff at some point.
Agreed. I got some quick hits for you too. Quentin Johnston, I think he's fool's gold. He had the 2 touchdowns this past week. I know, first round pedigree. They're hoping he is something. I just don't think the volume is there. I just don't think the Chargers are going to throw the ball out. They're playing Pittsburgh this week too. You don't really want any part of that there. So don't rush to pick them up this week. If you lost Tua at quarterback, Derek Carr is only 19% rostered in Yahoo League still, despite the Saints running just all over teams the first 2 weeks, including the Cowboys this past week. Sam Darnold looked competent. If you got to check Justin Jefferson's status. And of course, I know you wanted to mention Geno Smith.
Geno Smith, man, back-to-back really solid weeks. And that comes in with a disastrous week 1 against Denver where, they're taking multiple safeties. Geno threw a pick early on, still gave you like 18 fantasy points. And they threw the ball 44 times in week 2 against New England. So I think we're starting to see the vision for this new look Seattle offense. A lot of 3 wide receiver sets with Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, and Tyler Lockett all on the field together. And if Ken Walker misses more time, which I think seems likely at this stage, I think we continue to see a more pass-heavy approach for Seattle and a decent schedule as well coming up for Seattle. Miami, Detroit, and the Giants in their next 3. Obviously, Geno Smith, some of these quarterbacks we're discussing, they're more appealing in 2 quarterback leagues and super flex leagues, but I think Geno's worth rostering as a backup, even in a standard league. I mean, especially if maybe you have Tua Tagovailoa, or you're ready to be done with Trevor Lawrence or Justin Herbert or Matthew Stafford. I think that floor for Geno Smith is going to be there most weeks going forward. One bonus, Jeff, that I want to throw in here, because we got some news on Monday morning that the Carolina Panthers will be moving to Andy Dalton as their starter, at least for the foreseeable future. And, there's not a ton of actionable advice here, but I will say check in on Diontae Johnson. He was already dropped in a ton of Yahoo leagues on Monday morning. I think that number is going to continue to fall as the week goes on. I mean, there's like a 1 in 4 chance that Diontae Johnson might be out there. I don't think the Carolina offense could look any worse, right? I think Andy Dalton should raise the level of competency for this passing game. So obviously it's been a really frustrating start for Diontae Johnson. If somebody in your league, kind of rage dropped him, I don't mind picking him up and chasing some upside with Andy Dalton.
Yeah, and pertinent too in super flex leagues. We're only a couple of weeks away from bye week, so having 3 quarterbacks that are having a pulse, still a possibility there. So you can be useful there too.
Yeah, and I think this applies to Chuba Hubbard as well. He's rostered in less than half of Yahoo leagues right now, and again, that number probably falls as the week goes on. Carolina does have some tough matchups coming up in the next few weeks, but they also got games against Washington and Denver and the New York Giants coming up as well. So keep an eye on Chuba Hubbard and Diontae Johnson under the guise that Andy Dalton at least raises the floor for this Carolina offense and makes them a little bit more fantasy viable. All right, that'll do it for this week's edition of Sneaky Waiver Wire Ads. Before you head out, make sure you subscribe to the RotoWire YouTube channel. If you like what you're hearing here, give us a like as well. We always appreciate that. But make sure you're subscribed. You don't miss any of our content throughout the NFL season. And of course, check out rotowire.com/try. That's TRY. That'll give you a free peek behind the paywall. You can see all of our content, all the tools that we offer over at RotoWire. Rotowire.com/try. No credit card, no obligation to cancel. Go check it out.